My name is Hailey Morgan. I'm 28 and I live in Sacramento, California. But even now, whenever I hear a doorknob turning, my whole body freezes. When I was a kid, my mom used to say I had too much imagination. You watch too many cartoons, she'd say, barely even looking at me. But my memory, it's sharp, way sharper than it should be. I lived with her and my Aunt Melanie, her younger sister, in a one-story house with stained beige carpet and this weird mix of old food smell and cheap perfume. There was a narrow hallway and this janky ceiling light in the living room that made noise every time the wind blew. I was 7, full of questions no one ever answered. My mom worked double shifts as a nursing assistant and basically slept when the rest of the world was awake. Whenever she was home, she was too exhausted to even talk. So my aunt was the one taking care of me, like she liked to say, with her fake cheerful laugh, smudged red lipstick, and a stare that never matched her smile. She had this boyfriend named Troy, tall, white, probably in his early 30s, always in sleeveless shirts, looking like he didn't belong there, but never left. I didn't like how he looked at me, but nobody ever asked if I liked it or not. It was always late afternoon. When my mom left for her second shift, Melanie would say it was time for my special bath. I remember that word, special, because of how she said it, in this fake baby voice, way too sweet, like I was still in preschool or something. Come on, Hailey, take your clothes off. It's just a bath, no need for that face. The bathroom door was a pale green and never closed properly, so she always locked it from the inside. But she didn't stay with me. She let Troy in, and she stayed outside, sometimes blasting the radio in the kitchen, other times just smoking in the hallway. I'd hear the flick of her lighter. I didn't understand what was happening. All I felt was a heavy mix of disgust and fear. Troy barely spoke. He'd just be there with that dull expression and slow voice saying, just stay still. And then it was like time got stuck. My mind tried to erase what happened next. But the body remembers. The body never forgets. After the bath, my aunt acted like nothing happened. She'd dry me off fast, throw an old t-shirt on me, and hand me a lollipop like I was some kind of trained dog. Don't tell your mom, okay? She's already got too much going on. This is just our little secret. A ritual. A way for you to grow up nice and clean. And back then I thought maybe this was something that happened to all kids because I didn't really know anything beyond our public school and that stained little house we lived in. And at school nobody noticed anything. I got good grades, kept quiet, followed rules. Kids like that don't raise red flags. Until one day the principal called my mom in for a meeting. They said I had drawn something strange in art class, a bathtub, a man, and me. My mom laughed like it was a joke. This girl's got too much imagination. But when we got home that day, she slapped me out of nowhere. Didn't ask a thing, just hit me and told me to stop making things up. And that was the moment I understood. It's not that people don't see, it's that they don't want to see. After that, my aunt got colder with me. No more fake affection, just these quiet threats. If you keep making up stories, they'll send you to a foster home. Is that what you want? A place where nobody loves you? And I didn't even know what love was, but I knew for sure it wasn't that. Eventually, the bath stopped, not because she felt sorry, but because Troy found somewhere else to crash, and everything changed again. I grew up with this deep feeling that my childhood was just a pretty lie wrapped in silence. But the truth came crashing back years later when I came across a name, a police record, and a child that wasn't me. I never told anyone, not even when I turned 15, not even when I left home at 17 with a torn up backpack, $200 stuffed in my bra, and an envelope my mom left on the table with just 3 scribbled words. Good luck, Hailey. I never looked back. I lived in 6 different states, rented rooms from strangers, crashed on filthy couches, worked as a waitress in places where nobody even knew my last name. And for a long time, that was all I wanted, to be invisible. Nobody ever asked anything. I barely smiled, ate fast, avoided men who smelled like cheap cigarettes. I never took a shower with the door closed, not even in my first apartment. And even now, just hearing a lock click makes my stomach turn. When I was 23, I got accepted into a night course, just a technical one in business administration. I never dreamed of anything big or noble. I just wanted stability, a place of my own, a clean name. I started working at an insurance company, papers, spreadsheets, lukewarm coffee, Nobody there knew anything about me except what I let slip by accident. "You're so private, Haley," they'd say, like it was some cute little mystery, like it wasn't actually a high voltage fence wrapped in politeness. And the nights were always the worst. I'd wake up drenched, hands sweaty, hearing the doorknob turn like it was echoing inside my chest. I'd sleep with the light on and the TV volume low, like background voices could keep me safe. I never went to therapy, not because of shame, but because I was scared. Scared of confirming that whatever happened back in that steamy bathroom was still alive inside me, spread through my bones. One day I had to go to the records office to get a document from when I was a kid. The lady behind the desk asked for my mother's name, and I stood there frozen, hand shaking around the pen. I finally said Susan Morgan, with my mouth dry as paper. Then she asked, "There's another legal guardian listed here, Melanie Carter. Is that still valid?" And I swear I felt my blood freeze. Melanie, that woman, still existed. The file I tried to erase was still active, still real, still printed on official paper. That night, I searched her name online without expecting much and found an old social media profile, barely active, just two pictures, one of a birthday cake and the other of her holding a little girl, maybe 4 years old. It wasn't photoshopped. It wasn't a mistake. The caption said, "My treasure, my sweet little girl, special bath tonight." And I threw up in the kitchen trash can, couldn't sleep for 2 nights. On the third night, I sat back down in front of the computer, opened a new tab, and searched for him, Troy. I didn't remember his last name, but looking through her connections, I found it. Troy L. Kinsey. I came across a police report from 2008. The charge said home invasion and inappropriate conduct with a minor. The victim wasn't named, and the sentence was pathetic. Just a few months on probation and a restraining order. No mention of abuse, nothing specific. But I knew people who write those reports always try to make it sound okay. On paper, they don't write down the smell of lavender soap or the squeak of the bathroom door or how the water always ran just a little too warm, like it was trying to erase something invisible. I shut the laptop, sat on the floor in the middle of the room, stayed there for hours just listening to my own shaky breath. A week later, a new woman started at the office. She had one of those gentle smiles people wear when they're hiding dark circles. She told me she was a single mom, said her daughter was in kindergarten. I didn't say much, but something in me stirred. I started watching the way she talked on the phone, the way she asked 3 times if her daughter had eaten, if she was happy. It shook something in me. Then one day she sat next to me during break and said she was worried about the babysitter, said her little girl had been quiet and withdrawn and that the teacher had asked if something was going on at home. I felt every hair on my body stand up, and for the first time in years, something inside me spoke before I could shut it down. I asked the name of her daughter. She said Maya, 4 years old, 4, the same age as the girl in that photo. I couldn't hide it anymore. I went to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, stared into the mirror for 10 minutes trying to figure out what to do. I had no proof, no connection, but I had a warning going off inside me, one I knew better than to ignore. I went back to my desk, turned on the computer, typed in Melanie's name again, then her address, then the mom's name, and it all came together way too easily. The girls' school was in the same neighborhood where Melanie lived, the babysitter. Of course it was her. Melanie, my stomach flipped. I could have ignored it, could have played dumb, but I knew it wasn't about me anymore. It was about every kid she could shut up with a lollipop and a fake smile. I went home, took a shower with the door half open, put on the plainest clothes I had, opened my closet, pulled out a cardboard box full of old papers and notes, and took out a folded envelope. Inside the envelope was a note, messy handwriting from my mom that said, "Melanie loves you, trust her," and on the back, the date, April 6, 2003, the day of the first bath. I put the note back, but now it felt like it was burning through my skin. From that moment on, I knew I couldn't pretend it was just part of the past anymore. It was happening now, with names, with places, with a child right in the middle of it. I spent 3 straight days trying to block it out, closed my browser, turned off my phone, ate in the dark. Every time I thought of moving my body, my mind shut me back down. I kept telling myself this wasn't my problem, that this was over, that I'd survived once already, that it wasn't fair to relive all of it again for someone who didn't even know I existed. But I still couldn't sleep. On the fourth day, I went to Maya's school, sat across the street on a broken down bus bench no one used. The sun was barely up, and the kids started arriving little by little, backpacks on, eyes still sleepy. And then I saw her, Melanie, same posture, same polished look that didn't match her life, cheap floral dress, clunky black heels, and the girl, Maya, holding her hand stiff like she didn't want to, walking with her eyes glued to the ground. The whole scene lasted seconds, but it hit me so hard I couldn't breathe because I'd been that little girl. I got in my car, window shut, forehead against the steering wheel, forcing myself to breathe. I could have called the cops, made an anonymous report, but I knew how it worked. No proof, no case, and no one believes women like me, especially the ones who learned how to bleed without noise. That night, I called my mom for the first time in years. She answered with that groggy voice, like she'd just woken up even though it was 8 at night. When I heard her voice, I froze for a second, but I couldn't back out now. I asked her about Melanie. She laughed and said they didn't speak anymore. She never knew how to take care of anything, Hailey, not even her own life, she said like it didn't mean anything. I told her. I remembered some things. She went quiet and then replied with that same cold voice she always used when she didn't want to deal with something. If you start digging into the past, you're going to find mud, and people who mess with mud get dirty. And I hung up, realizing the truth I had always known. My mom wasn't blind. She just chose not to see it because it was easier, because it was convenient, because she didn't want the weight of knowing. The next day, I went to work like it was just another Monday, but my body wasn't there. I typed numbers, smiled when I needed to, drank terrible coffee, but my head was stuck on that sidewalk, on that little girl who wouldn't look up. Maya's mom, the new coworker, was eating lunch a few tables away. She smiled less now. Her eyes looked heavy, like something inside her wouldn't sit right, and I knew she felt it. Mothers know, even when they don't understand what it is. A week later, I went to the police station, sat down with a social worker, told her I wanted to file a report. She looked at me like she'd heard this kind of thing too many times, asked for Melanie's full name and address. I gave her everything, and then came the question, did you witness anything? And that's where my voice stopped, because no, not with this little girl, not with Maya, just with another girl, a long time ago, me. I told her that, said, I was one of the kids, but no one saw it. She just looked at me, listened, didn't interrupt, then told me she could file a report, but without proof there wouldn't be much they could do. She thanked me, handed me a form, said I could come back if anything changed. I walked out of that room feeling like I wanted to cry, but I didn't, because crying doesn't fix anything, screaming doesn't fix anything, and silence kills. And I had been silent for way too long. By the end of that week, I decided to talk to Maya's mom, waited for the right moment. I couldn't just drop it on her like an accusation. So I said I knew the woman taking care of her daughter, that she had once taken care of me too when I was little. She looked at me confused, said Melanie was sweet and caring, and treated Maya like her own granddaughter. And I just took a breath and told her. She used to say the same thing when she gave me baths with the door locked. Her face changed slowly, layer by layer, first confusion, then fear, then something deeper, something stronger, instinct, the kind only moms have. The next day, she didn't take Maya to school, didn't show up at work either, and by Monday I asked for a department transfer because I knew she wasn't coming back. A week later, I got a call, restricted number. It was a man's voice, sounded official, said my report along with another recent one had triggered a formal investigation, said Melanie was being questioned, said Troy, the man I spent years trying to erase, had also been found, said the case was open. And I hung up, not knowing if I felt relief or like throwing up. It didn't feel like justice, didn't feel like peace. It felt like the beginning of a whole new kind of pain. That night, I took a hot shower with the lights off, and for the first time, I locked the door. I stayed in there until the water turned cold. I thought I'd feel free, like once the investigation started, I could finally sleep without that pressure in my chest. But that's not how healing works. There's no sudden release when the wound's still fresh and aching. What came next was a bitter kind of waiting. Days and nights where I stared at the ceiling, imagining conversations I knew would never happen. Then I got an email from the Child Protection Department, a formal request for a full statement. They wanted everything. Details, dates, names, everything my brain had spent years trying to bury. So I sat down at the kitchen table with the laptop open and a glass of water I didn't touch for hours. And I started writing, and with every paragraph it felt like I was peeling my skin from the inside out. I had to remember the cracked tile on the bathroom floor, His voice, the way my aunt used to press soap into my hand, like it was some kind of gift, the smell of the wet towel, the looks no one else noticed. It took me 3 days to finish, and when I did, I hit send. Without reading it again, I couldn't, because if I read one more line, I knew I'd become that little girl all over again, and I didn't want to be her anymore. I wanted her to disappear, because remembering her hurt more than anything else. A week later, the phone rang. A woman with a deep voice said the investigation had expanded. 2 more reports had come in, different people from different states, but the same pattern, same story, and Troy's name came up again like a ghost that never really left, always around fragile women, always playing the frequent visitor, always nearby when there was a child in the house. His record was worse than I thought. Scattered charges, complaints brushed aside, nothing solid, nothing enough, because his silence worked, and the system helped him. The world's always been afraid of believing children, especially the ones no one screams for. Now, with 3 statements and 1 indirect witness, things had changed, but only in shape, not in structure. The social worker told me the DA might open a case, but it depended on the family's willingness to testify. And since my case was too old, it might only serve as background, not as evidence. I thanked her, but my mouth tasted like dust. A few days later, Melanie's name showed up in the local paper. Tiny headline at the bottom of the page, no photo. Under investigation for alleged misconduct while caring for a minor. The words were cold. Alleged misconduct. That sterile language that turns horror into data. At work, people started whispering. When I walked by, it didn't take long for them to put the pieces together. Maya's mom had disappeared, and I was the only one who knew too much. A manager called me in with that fake concern tone and asked if everything was okay at home. I said yes, but maybe I needed a few days off. She nodded without pushing. I spent 2 weeks shut in, went to the pharmacy for herbal calming pills, locked my windows, turned off the Wi-Fi, spent the days trying to figure out what the hell I was feeling, fear, rage, exhaustion, all tangled up. I tried writing again, but the page just stared back at me like it knew I was lying. I tried calling my mom, but she didn't pick up, and I didn't try again. Then one gray Wednesday, I got a message, unknown number, 4 words. You destroyed the family. No signature, but I didn't need one. It had Melanie's fingerprints all over it. Cold, blaming, pretending to be the victim with that same dirty elegance she always had. I read the message a bunch of times, and for the first time, I didn't cry. I replied calmly. I wrote, "You don't build a family on silenced bodies." Then I blocked the number, not because I was scared, but because she didn't deserve space on my phone, and definitely not in my head. The following week, Troy was arrested not because of my case, but for another one. An 8-year-old girl, distant cousin of a woman he was living with, and this time the evidence was clear. A video caught by accident, a door left slightly open, just enough to end any denial. I saw the news in an online article. The photo of him was old, but you could still recognize that soft, saggy face, those half-dead eyes, patchy beard, and next to the headline were comments ranging from shock to disbelief. Who would have guessed? He seemed so normal. These things never happen out of nowhere. And no, they don't, not really. The only difference now was someone saw. I closed the browser and walked around the house in silence. Every step made the wood creak like the floor was shifting with me. I sat on the living room floor and leaned against the wall, knees pulled to my chest, and stayed there until it got dark. No music, no lights. Just me and the weight of all those years finally starting to lift off my shoulders. 2 days later, I got another email from the DA's office, said my report would be added to the case as evidence of pattern, cold words, but they meant something in that moment. A kind of justice that doesn't come like in the movies. It comes in pieces, in forms, in legal terms, but it comes. That night, I dreamed about the bathroom again, but this time, the door opened, and I walked out. I don't know what's going to happen to Melanie. The investigation is still going. Maya's mom never reached out to me, but she never came back to the office either, probably moved away. And honestly, I hope she did. I hope she's far. I hope her daughter grows up never knowing who that woman in the floral dress with the empty eyes really was. I didn't want redemption or to be some kind of hero. I just wanted someone to believe me. And now, for the first time, someone does. Even if nobody says it out loud, even if no one apologizes, even if justice doesn't mean repair. What matters is I spoke, and now no one can say they didn't know. It took longer than I thought to understand there's no clean ending. The truth doesn't show up wrapped in ribbons and confessions. No one knocked on my door saying they believed me. There was no warm hug, no tears of regret. What came was silence, but a different kind of silence, not the one that strangles you, but the kind that makes space. The days started to pass slowly, but without pain in the walls, the house felt different, like every room had finally exhaled with me. The kitchen had light again. I opened the windows and let the breeze in, changed the old sheets, threw out that stained pillow that reminded me of nightmares. I didn't plan any of it, just followed this strange urge to rename things, the objects, the rooms, the routines. 3 weeks after Troy's arrest, an envelope showed up in the mail. No return address, no stamp I could trace. Inside was an old photo of me around 8 years old, sitting in the backyard of my mom's house, Melanie standing beside me holding a garden hose, smiling at the camera like she was the aunt of the year, and on the back, a handwritten message. You were always a difficult girl. That's how the world spins. People like her still thinking they can win with guilt and manipulation. I tore the photo into tiny pieces and dropped it in the trash without hesitation, without anger, just closure, just the end. I started walking around the neighborhood at dusk, not looking for anything, just letting myself be carried by the sound of barking dogs, creaking gates, cars coming back from work. And one day, I passed a small bookstore I'd never noticed before. I walked in. It was modest, well kept, and smelled like freshly flipped pages. I stayed there for an hour, no rush, picked up a blue-covered book and read the first few lines. It talked about women who wrote letters they never sent. I connected instantly, took it home. That night I started writing mine, not to anyone specific, just letters, some to myself at 7 years old, others to people who maybe never even existed. And in all of them, I tried to say what no one ever told me, that it wasn't my fault, that I didn't deserve what happened, that nobody ever does. The words came out raw, but clean. No need to sugarcoat, no urge to be forgiven for surviving. When I found out Troy's trial was scheduled, I didn't want to go. The DA invited me. I could be there, I could speak, but I didn't want to, not because I lacked courage, but because I realized my story had already been told. I didn't need to scream anymore. I'd already said what mattered, and now it was echoing in other places through other voices that maybe carried even more weight now. I just wanted to move forward. I went back to work, slower, more intentional, less afraid. I switched departments. I insisted on it, surrounded myself with new people, didn't say anything about what happened, not because I was hiding, but because I didn't owe anyone the story. I kept it as part of what shaped me, not as a label. No one else would ever get to decide who I was again. One day, I walked into a cafe and ordered a latte with toasted bread. When I went to pay, the guy behind the counter said it was covered, a gift from the lady in the back. I turned around and saw her, Maya's mom, sitting alone, wearing a yellow coat and a calm look on her face. I walked over. We didn't talk about Melanie or police or trauma. She just said, "She's okay. She's safe." I nodded. That was enough. We sat there for a few minutes, two women who survived different versions of the same pit. Before she left, she placed a folded note next to her cup. Inside, 3 words: "You saved her." I cried in the car, not from pain, but from relief, like finally some part of me had come back from limbo. I didn't become an activist or a counselor, but I wrote, I kept everything, and I sent a testimony to an NGO that supports invisible victims. They published it anonymously. I got messages from strangers, people who never had a voice, people like me. One of them wrote, "Your story helped me understand it wasn't my fault." And that was enough. Today my house has plants in the windows. The bathroom door locks, and it doesn't scare me. The hallway light doesn't need to stay on at night. I have a shelf full of books and a drawer stuffed with letters no one will ever read, and I'm okay with that. Because finally, after so long, being the echo of something that quietly broke me, now I'm the voice of what survived, whole, alone but not lost, not needing to prove anything to anyone, and most of all, no longer afraid of the door closing. If this story touched you in any way, leave a like so I know it was worth exposing this pain in words. And if you want to share something, say how you felt, or just let me know you made it to the end, drop a comment below. Every comment is a reminder that no silence can erase a truth spoken with a steady voice.